What does it take to be a successful entrepreneur? A dangerous amount of coffee and a ton of grit. My name is Jason Tracy, and every week I interview business leaders to share their stories, life lessons, failures, and advice with you. Welcome to Coffee and Grit. What is up? What is up? What is up? We've got the coffee rolling this morning. You know, the thing with my recording, a lot of you might not know, is I record on Mondays at 2 p.m. the episodes. And so by time 2 p.m. hits, I'm usually coffeeed out. And so lately I've had guests like, why don't you ever bring coffee? It's because it's 2 p.m. and I'm not really thinking about it at that time. But we've got a 10 a.m. episode, baby. We're here in the morning. It's the day after Labor Day, so we needed our coffee. And so we've got Jill Haas in the studio today. And Jill is a returning guest. Jill was a guest. The episode came out in February of 2022. So I'm guessing that we probably recorded it in like January of that. I'm trying to think of my editing time that I had by the time the episode was rolled out. But it's just a phenomenal episode. And then I haven't, just sitting here and kind of catching up. It's funny because she said the same exact thing that was on my brain is like, I've seen you out in the wild, here and there. And we were able to catch up a couple months ago and schedule this, but we haven't really dove into some conversation. And then we're sitting here and she asked me, what's the theme of the episode? And we just start talking. And because that's what we do, right? It's the authentic conversation that really dives into it. And I am so excited for some of the things that we're going to talk about. One, if you don't know and you haven't listened to the first episode, listen to it. It's a really, really good episode. But Jill works with highly sensitive people, and we're going to dive into what that looks like and what that means. And then what does it look like and mean as a coach and as an entrepreneur as you're transitioning and shedding layers and going through things. And so there's going to be so much more, but that's just been some of the fun stuff. So Jill, welcome to the studio.
Thank you, Jason. It's exciting to be back and in this new vibe. Like, I love the studio. It's super cool. And I've been enjoying watching you grow into your own here. And you've got the Lion's Breath coffee and the story you just shared a little bit ago to me privately with Cameron out there, that it was just so cool how things just fell into place for you. I'm really proud of you.
It's so cool. And it's one of those things like, I said this out loud as like the coffee. I was like, does it really make sense with my business? Right. And there's just sometimes things become so easy. And then there's other things other services and things I've created that I've fought so hard to get off the ground. Have you had anything like that where you work so hard at it and it just goes nowhere and then something comes along and it's just easy? It's like, I'm going to go with the easy thing because it may not make sense, but I think it does somewhere.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because sometimes just in life we are like aiming at something and it can be feel just exhausting to get there. And then you have to wonder, I do, because that's what I do now is I'm like, is this really the path I'm supposed to be on? And sometimes you can ask people and they'll say, well, of course, because that means it's just making you grow. But it's like, but you have to really see, is it in line with my values? Or is the universe sending me signs that are really just kind of like there's another direction and you just haven't kind of 5-degree turn to look at it and see like, oh, there's something more over there that's a little bit, I see, it's clearer now. But sometimes we're just so hardcore going. And I know for me, I have gone at the doors that's closed and I'm banging on the door like, open, open, open. And it just doesn't open. And it's like, when I finally realize, wow, that door wasn't for me. But boy, was I putting a lot of effort into making it open.
Yeah. How many people can relate to this right now as we're talking about this for real? And that's what I love about this, is because it's so... Stories Radio Souls, we're sitting and talking about our situations. I can guarantee you somebody else is going through this right now.
Yeah. And it's really enlightening when you get to the other side. Like, I like to call it the other side of the river. So that's whether we're talking about, the perspectives that we had on one side, when we're on the other side and we can see clearly like, wow, that's who I used to be, or that's what I was doing. Wow, and I'm not doing that now. But when we're not on the other side and we're still on the same side and we're like, God, how do I get over there? It's just like sometimes it's so murky or confusing or chaotic in our head, and we can't settle down, or we just can't seem to get there, and it feels defeatist. And I know that I have had the pleasure of letting a lot of things go this summer. I think we were talking about that a little bit. And it's amazing when we do realize that some of the things that we're pushing against are just not for us, to just release them, and then how we can just open up a greater capacity for life in general.
Absolutely. We stick to those emotionally so hard. And then isn't it weird when as soon as you let that go, things do kind of fill its place?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Have you ever experienced where we have, because I think that you're a hard worker too. I'm not afraid of hard work. I just go do worker bee. Let's do it. I put my head down. I'm going to work. But sometimes we get so set on the goal that we aren't really paying that much attention. We're just doing all the tasks and we're not maybe even noticing that there's a pushback, or we're not noticing that maybe this isn't the right path, but we are kind of attached to the outcome and what it means about me, or what people are going to think about this if I don't finish. And that's some of the stuff that I have really come to terms with this year.
So let's talk more about that. Like, what is that? What are some of the things that weren't for you?
Well, so this is going to be hard to say, but and it's so I want to preface before I say this. So anybody who's listening, this has nothing to do with the people or my choice. At the time, I had all good intentions. But in 2019, I started a nonprofit for veterans, and I have a great passion for working with veterans, and I still want to work with them. But I realized that goal that I was shooting for with opening the nonprofit, it didn't start as my idea. It was actually a couple other people's idea, and then it seemed like a good one at the time. Like, let's do this. And I really thought, after talking to some people in nonprofits, like, oh yeah, you can get this and this can happen, and you can just help so many more people. And that was what I wanted to do. Well, it turned out, of course, that was like right before COVID. Everything just like, whew. So nothing got off the ground. And then I kept trying to resuscitate it. I kept trying, and it wasn't going anywhere. And that is one of those things that was really hard to let go of. I mean, it's one thing to say, okay, I took a college course and it really wasn't my style.
Yeah,
I can't see doing that. Or even I had a job and I spent 5 years in that job, and now I realize I don't even want to do the chosen career that I have a degree in, because I've done that too. But a nonprofit, opening up this nonprofit where, and this is all perception, right? It's all what I'm thinking that the world is thinking, that they're looking at me.
Yep.
Well, you open this nonprofit and you're going to do all these things. And then it was such a big welcoming and embracing. And then to then say, I'm letting this go, and having that decision, like I think I wavered with it a couple times over the last 2 years even. And I'm like, well, I just got to make this work. But the truth was, I was spreading myself so thin, I couldn't do anything. To move forward. I wasn't moving forward. I was getting frustrated, resentful, and not at people, but at myself. And I was just, and then I just couldn't do the action. So it was hard, and it was sad to I felt like I let my veterans down. I have my board members, and they were really counting on this to work, and it just wasn't going forward. And granted, I could have probably, so I'm going to just be totally transparent, is there was a trademark issue that showed up. And so I'm familiar with this. I've done some study on it, had a class on it, and not a class, but I've done some learning about trademarks. And so a letter came in that showed us that our name was very similar to a name of a nonprofit, it's a program in Virginia, which is part of a foundation, also working with veterans, doing similar things. So as trademark law goes, you don't, you have to either change your name. I mean, I could have fought it. I talked to an attorney, and she's like, yeah, it's worth a fight, but I just didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
And I didn't have it. I was already like, I just don't have it in me to even go forward right now. And I felt like I was carrying a lot, and I just had to make this decision. So someone else could have taken it over, but that wasn't really ideally going to happen. So we just, as a board, voted to close it down. So again, that doesn't mean I don't want to help veterans. I mean, my passion is helping people grow and shift and change and feel free. Like, freedom is what we all want. Mm-hmm. And I still want to do that, just in a different way. So continuing on with my other business, of course, but yeah, so that was a big decision in May. And then the process of letting that go over the summer, final day was actually Saturday. When we made this appointment, Jason, I did not know this was happening at all.
Wow.
No idea.
Wow. That's incredible. Like, so just in the sense that the last time we talked, how much life can change. Mm-hmm. How does that feel as Saturday is the last day and it's done now?
Great question. Well,
it's still raw, right?
Yeah. Well, I just deactivated the Facebook page yesterday. Technically, I should have done it on Saturday, but yeah, it felt. I was almost like, push the button. Okay, I guess it's done. And looking at it, it's not like I had 100,000 followers, or it wasn't. that huge, but it was what I was making it mean about me and what I was projecting on, or still probably am projecting onto other people, what they're thinking about me and what I've done and what I haven't done. And it's almost like sometimes we think people are living in our heads and they can hear all of our thoughts and all of our failures and all the things that we said we should do or could do and we're going to do and we don't do.
Yeah.
And then we're holding ourselves on a hook for not doing those things, thinking that everyone else knows, but they don't. But if I'm carrying that energy around, they're going to wonder, what is she hiding? What's going on there? She seems like she's holding back. And it's like, well, yeah, I probably was, because I was feeling like I am not doing my due diligence here because I have the resources weren't there for me, energetically. If I didn't have to sleep, maybe, maybe I'd have more time.
Yeah.
But I just took on way too much.
Yeah. So when you had those tough conversations and you went to the board, what did it end up? How did it end up playing out? Because you have the voices in your head that are telling you one thing, or people are going to think this way or assume this way. What ended up happening, and how'd that play out?
Well, I had a couple side conversations with individual board members over the last couple of years. So they kind of knew that my head was sort of like, I wonder, what would happen if we did this, or, should we keep going? And, but then, I sent out an email to everybody before we met and just kind of prefaced them like, here's what's happening. Here's the real situation. Here's a copy of the letter that we got. The trademark looks legit. We either have to do this or this. And if we change the name, then these are the things that have to happen. And here's where I'm at with it. And then we had a meeting about it. And basically how it ended up is just like, there were some tears and sadness, and it wasn't just me,
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I was probably the one that started it. But, my heart is still in it. It just, I had to do the hard thing. And I think put myself first in that way,
5,000%. Because again, you said I can sacrifice sleep, and like your intentions are to help, right? And if you're not able to refill your bucket and put your energy and heart into it, you're not able to help.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that's how I felt. I was just depleted. And then with doing this, I had put on this summit earlier this year, and that took a lot out of me, to the degree that I got it all done and everything was professionally looking. I've got a lot of compliments from people. So at least I know I presented well, but inside it was like really emotionally draining and tiring, and being a sensitive person, highly sensitive person, that, I put a lot into things, and it took a lot for me to bounce back. I did kind of go into the bunny hole for a little while. And even my coaches were kind of like, Jill, are you out there? What's going on? Yeah, I'm working on this. I'm doing that. And I wasn't. I was hunkering down, and I was just like, I don't know if I want to do this. I don't know. What am I doing? Who am I? And then this whole thing happened in May, because that's when I was just about to start getting going with, getting out of the bunny hole. I was peeking out, twitching my whiskers. Like, I think I can get a sense of like, I think I can do this now. And then boom, it was like May 2nd, this letter came. And then I was just like backing back into that hole. Like, I don't think I could do this. I got to be honest with myself and just, make a decision. So, it just came at a time that I think I was already making the conversations known, or with myself.
I love this conversation because so I have a client that I'm working with right now, and they wrote a book called Shine, and it's for highly driven people, which I can guarantee, I know you are, and it's like, and as we've had this conversation, it's made me think of their framework and their foundation quite a bit. We go out and we're the creators of all the great things. But we're also, it's like that blessing and that curse, because we also like have a tendency to get in our heads, mm-hmm. or destroy relationships, or not necessarily you are, but like as driven people, there's so many curses to that, right? Mm-hmm. And so they give this like framework, these 10 disciplines in order to find energy, find peace, and in whatnot. And it's like, being able to say no often, or being able to like not take on the world's problems, because we do want to go out there and help people so much. And then you go out there and you create this nonprofit, and like you said, I've quit jobs, or I've left jobs, I quit a course, and that's not a big deal. It's the attachment of what the purpose is, right? And that you have this heart to go out and help people, and now you have to stop.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like quitting a job anymore.
Right.
You've now attached all those emotions to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then all the voices that I think people are saying about me in the dark, and it sounds like I'm paranoid or something, but I think
No.
this is a humanity thing
Absolutely.
that we all do this. And I mean, I have my clients too. They're just, what are they going to think? And the thing is that I know it's all in my head. It's all that what I'm doing inside. And this is what I teach my clients. But here I am. I'm like in the thick of it, experiencing it. And to the point that, I have, again, several coaches I work with, and again, I was hunkering down big time in July, and they had to call me out, and I had to get going, and it's just like, I just got to make commitment. And I realized that I just was lacking commitment on some things for whatever reason. I don't know exactly why, but I'm going to guess that it has to do with being visible and being seen for who I really am. And is the world even going to like the authentic me that they see?
Yep. Yeah. Oh my God, this book. You need to check out this book. But it's like that know thyself and being able to be 100% authentically you 100% of the time, not worrying about what people think about you.
Right. Yeah. And it's funny because I know that my dad and my brother are really good at that, but I think they actually internalize it in a way that it can come out some other way.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of people know this, but we learn from our primary caregivers how to be. And a lot of our beliefs come from them, our way of being. And I think I learned how to really think I know what other people are thinking and scan the environment for it to take a guess. And then it can be a little like debilitating, right? Because you're constantly wondering. And so that comes with, people pleasing, it could be, but I think it really boils down to not feeling like you're enough.
Yep.
That's a big one. And I think a lot of people struggle with this, in different areas. It's not like I'm always walking around, I don't feel like enough. That's not it. It's in different areas. So especially now with this nonprofit, it's like, oh man, that's a hit. It's like a gut punch. Like, oh, okay. And, and I can choose to make it mean what I want. I can sit here and go, oh, no big deal. But that's not the truth. I mean, it's not the truth. The truth is, like, that was a big deal. I put a lot of work into it, a lot of heart and soul. And I know other people did too that were helping. And we all had a vision of things going a certain way. But then, like you said, we need to put ourselves first sometimes. And we have to learn how to say no when things aren't, when that door is closed and it's not opening again, or it's not opening at all. Like, maybe there's a reason. Maybe there's something bigger on the other side. So that's what I'm seeing now is because I've let that go, other things have opened up this summer, even though it's been challenging to come out of the bunny hole, so to speak.
Yeah.
Other things are opening, and I'm seeing more of myself now because I'm not so spread out, and my brain isn't consumed with all the things that I think I should be doing that I'm not doing. There's still those things, right?
Yep.
But they're not as many. Like, I probably cut it in half now, and it's still a lot. And it's still going to take some time to get through this. I mean, we could call it a loss. There could be some grief recovery in there, maybe. But I think this really boils down to how I'm perceiving things and how to be a leader and show myself anyway.
Well, so can I share a story real quick?
Please.
So this reminds me of, before I started my business, this is 2016, I ran for school board here in Brighton. And this reminds me a lot of kind of this situation I wanted to help, right? And it was kind of a situation. I ran for a few reasons. One, because it was easy. I coached a kid in basketball, and his dad was on the school board here in Brighton. And we were having a conversation, and he was like, "You're great. I would love, we need more people like you on the board. You should run." And it kind of piqued my interest because I was like, "Oh, I want to make a difference. I want to make a difference in my community, and that sounds great." And so I met him, and we had a conversation, and I was all fired up. And I'm like, one, I was stuck in a comfort zone at the time. I was just, kind of stuck in my job, and I was coming home and just same routine. And I'm like, I feel like I'm going to be stuck this way if I don't do something to shake it up. And so that was one of the things I told my wife of why I wanted to do it. The other thing is I wanted to make a difference. And I felt like I was just stuck doing the same exact thing. And I wanted to make a difference in my community. So I ran for school board, and it was the most, diverse, hardest time of my life. Like, one of the hardest times of my life. Like, there's just a lot of like that criticism, a lot of like focus and attention. And there was a lot. I could sit and tell stories about this whole experience all day. And there were several times that I wanted to quit. And, but it was like, oh, I can't let people down. For one, my son was watching, and I'm like, I'm setting the example for him. I can't quit, and so I just got to keep on going. And so we get to the day of election day. It was actually the first year that Trump ran and won. Was that 2016? 2016. He lost in 2020, right?
Oh, right. Yeah. So, yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So 2016. It was a huge voter
time.
turnout. So I just remember that. And so the day of, I was like praying that I don't win, but at the same time, I'm so competitive that I didn't want to lose. So I'm out there working it and grinding. And like, I was making calls and knocking on doors and doing the things to win this thing. And I only lost by like 100 votes. I got like 8,000 votes or something here in Brighton. It was like a huge voter turnout. And I was like, I was so close to the most miserable time of my life. Because I was like, seeing all this, and like, you go to a school board meeting now in Brighton. I don't know if you've ever been to one.
I've seen some on video.
They're horrible. It's horrible people doing horrible things. Just, there's no positive light there. Like, no matter how much I think you want to make a difference, I think there's other ways to go out there and make a difference. And that was my huge discovery out of the whole entire thing was, wow, I dodged a close one. 1, 2, it got me out of my comfort zone for sure. Like, if I can do that, I can do anything. I can go start a business. Like, I can, I can go do other things, because that was uncomfortable. That was like walking around the community and like horrible things are being said about me on social media, and like thinking everybody's talking about me, like little voices, right? You find out that there's such a low percentage of people that actually are in the know and in that loop. But still, I'm walking around the community thinking like everybody's staring at me, that kind of thing. In going through that, it's just, it made me tougher there. But then, a couple of years later, I was able to start my business, and that was easy in retrospect to some of the stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And then like, you've got that foundation now of like resilience that you built from that. And I think, that's the biggest thing that we have to look at when we don't have to do anything, but the benefit to looking at the different perspective of when something ends, we can say there's a new beginning always, there could be. And it's the better perspective to look at. Just because something ends doesn't mean it's in failure. It means that it's done. It's run its course, or it's the end of a season.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be the end of someone or the end of a career or anything. It doesn't. And it sounds like what you went through was this huge growth period to learn how to, get a thicker skin. And you may have already had one, but boy, this really just challenged it and pushed the envelope for you. And you were able to rise above it, which is also huge, because sometimes the kinds of things can just crush someone for life.
Absolutely.
Depending on where you're at in your mind with your resiliency, and those little voices can come over and take over in your head and be your counsel. And don't you leave the house. Don't you show your face, put a bag over your head, because you've done terrible things, you know? And, but the truth is you did nothing wrong. And I know you know that. And, you did something great. Like, you had all the great intentions and you went forward, and then it didn't work out. Like you said, I love that what you said. You were that close from having the worst time of your life, or however you phrased that.
It was a 3-year commitment, This is not a,
Yeah, you did. You don't want to take that lightly. So what a shift though, right?
What a shift.
Where would you be today had you won?
That's a good question. And it's like those little moments of, I think that, again, when things aren't for us anymore, we get that constant reminder, and it's kind of a pain and a struggle. And then sometimes the door opens and it's just easier over here. I've realized I could make a difference in a completely different way, that I didn't have to be on a board to be able to do that, or I didn't have to do this official thing to do that. And I've been able to make a bigger difference in my community through what I'm doing now than what I would have ever did on a school board.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that is, that's really interesting that you said that. That reminds me of my husband and I were foster parents for a very short time because we wanted to make a difference in that way. We don't have our own children. And
Yeah.
so it ended up not working out at all. I won't get into any of that. And it was a very bad scene, let's just say. And that just ended it right there. And there was an opportunity when we were still in the system. It was like a couple months later after the girl that we had was gone. And they were like, oh, well, we've got a baby here that is ready to be, the court's going to rule in favor of guardianship or something. And it'll basically can be your own child in 6 months or something like that. And it was like, wow, that was exciting to think like we could do that. And then I brought that to my husband and I was like, well, here's a situation. And it turns out there's a half brother too, or something that we could, could be like instant family almost. And he's like, well, I'm all for it, but you have to decide. You're trying to build this business. It's going to be the kids or this business. And I'm going to cry. Shoot. I did not expect to do that. So anyway, because it's not even about the kids, but I'm realizing right now that I made a big decision. And that decision back then was not about the kids. It was about what I wanted to do. Like you said, make a bigger difference in the world. And I knew because I was really trying to help that one girl that we had. I really was trying so hard. I threw so much into it and nothing was shifting. And I was like, I can't do this for another 10, 15 years, and just, run ragged and have the truancy officer calling me all the time and telling me she's run away and all these things. Like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. And I was working at the hospital and getting paged all the time. Like, how does a parent do this?
Yeah.
So anyway, so we had that experience that made it so tough to decide. But at the same time, when my husband brought that to me, and it has nothing to do with him or it wasn't about that. He made a real not a comparison, but make a choice. And because I'm all in. So I chose the business because I knew I could help more people that way if I put myself out there. And then came in all that other stuff of, took me a while to get to where I'm at right now because I was just, not good enough, and even probably holding that foster daughter that we had over my head, holding myself on a hook.
Yeah.
Like you failed with her. You couldn't make it work. How are you going to help other people? You know?
Yep.
Yeah.
Isn't it crazy what we do to ourselves?
It is crazy. And so aware, you can be so painfully aware. I mean,
yeah.
Have you ever noticed yourself just not doing something and you're in your head and you're just like, I'm not doing this right now. And look at me still not doing it. And I'm still not doing it. And that's me. Maybe I'm the only one that does that.
Well, I think we all do it.
Yeah.
But then, when we're coaching other people and we see it, it's like, I don't know about you, but I get even more in my head of how can I tell other people how to do this? And then I can't even catch it myself.
Absolutely. Yeah. Then it becomes the kind of imposter syndrome or whatever comes up. And yeah, for sure.
That's exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
I totally relate.
Yeah.
Because we're not perfect. We're human. And that's the thing. I think sometimes people look up to us when we are coaches and they think we have all the answers. But we are really, truly, coaches are really just a few steps ahead of their clients, right? Maybe we're more than a few steps. It just depends. But we've had the experience and we can help them and help them where we are. And then we're still growing too. And I know that I would want a coach that's still going through stuff because then they're actively knowing how to work through it.
That's exactly it. And again, as we talked about this before the cameras came on, of knowing a coach that has not just gone through the stuff, but is doing the work.
Yeah, exactly. Because sometimes I've even have been on the receiving end of coaches who just want to give advice, and you're just like, yeah, I could look that up on Google. I don't need that. I need some deeper insight here. I need you to ask me some powerful questions and to really be here with me. And I need some help. I'm drowning over here. Can you see that? Don't just tell me to go out and make 10 more calls and that's how it's going to solve my problems. That's not going to do it for me. I mean, accountability is one thing and checking things off a list, but there's other things to consider. And I think it's super important for people who are working with other people in a service industry that they're doing their own work, even if they're, working on, they're not doing a one-to-one therapeutic type work or coaching, but any service industry.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Because we're touching so many lives when we're out in the wild. I love that term.
Yeah. I do.
And it's like I say it all the time. Like when you're out in the wild. But yeah, we can help so many more people when we are working on ourselves. We're more prepared, more resilient, more emotionally stable, even though it may not seem like I am right now.
Well, but even you being able to come on and talk about this and share this stuff shows that foundation, right? And because I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of people. It takes a certain person to be able to come in with the cameras and be able to share this. Yeah,
that's true. And it's vulnerability. Like you have to be able to be vulnerable. And I think that's one of the key components of a really good coach is to be able to be honest, open, vulnerable. And it's not to say when you're in a session with somebody or, you're breaking down in tears with them, but sharing emotion and really connecting with somebody and feeling something with them. And, I get teary eyed sometimes and I think that's great. But yeah, I want to have someone there with empathy and compassion and the person who's done the work, and I know that you do your own work because you wouldn't be as successful as you are right now without it.
Well, because we do go through this stuff and you can be here one day, right? On top of the world and like making all the right decisions or, like when we talked last, you were preparing for a summit and you were doing all the social media stuff and everything and, and then all of a sudden get in our heads.
Yeah.
It can happen just like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not just for us. It's for people listening too. You can be on top of the world and then all of a sudden next day,
absolutely.
Like, how do I tie my shoe? How do I get out of bed?
Exactly. And that is such a great point because I know this summer, it seemed like it was out of the blue, but when I think about it, I know it was just this shedding of layers. I was having a day where I was just like, could not stop crying. Like, is something wrong with me? And then I'm immediately like, okay, is this depression? What is this? What is my problem? And then I know I usually get through it. And the cool thing is because I've done a lot of my own inner work that the time where I do go down in the well is a lot shorter than it used to be, right? We're all going to have, as long as you're human and you're not a robot or an AI, you're going to have emotion and you're going to have days where you fluctuate, especially as a highly sensitive person. That's like, I'm sure you see this with your clients too.
Let's talk about this because for people, we've mentioned this a few times and people are like, what does that mean?
Yeah. Highly sensitive person. Yeah. So highly sensitive people, there's actually a quiz if you really want to know that you're a highly sensitive person. It's on Elaine Aron's website. It's hsperson.com. And there's a score. I think there's like 25 questions on there. And, the higher you score, it's very subjective. And, so you can go there and see if that's you. And there's also another term called high sensation seeking. So you can be a highly sensitive person and also be high sensation seeking, which means somebody who's not necessarily jumping out of airplanes or parachuting. It's not necessarily like that, but it could be. But it could be you're just like, want more information. You just want to learn, and you get a high off of learning all these things and doing things and getting excited about something, being real passionate. So there's those two traits. And with highly sensitive person, there's usually a deep sense of empathy. Sometimes someone who's considered an HSP might find that too much lighting, too much sensory stimulation is over the top, right? And then there's some people might go, oh, that sounds awful. Well, you can manage it. You just learn how to manage it, and then we build our resilience up, and we learn how some of our sensitivity works within us because it's different for everyone, and we can mitigate it, inside. It doesn't have to be an outside controlling the environment thing. It can be an inside, not controlling ourselves, but letting go of what's causing us to feel so sensitive, like a hypervigilance in a way. And the other thing I wanted to say about that is you might find that like maybe you're stimulated with like crowds or loud noises. Couldn't be at a gun range because that would just be too much, or a concert. And a lot of veterans struggle with a lot of these things.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing that I found over the years I was working with veterans is the ones I attracted, just like you tend to attract the, sensitives in your line of work.
Yep.
It's because you are. And the same, I feel that same way for me. I was attracting highly sensitive veterans to me. Maybe not 100%, but I would say it was a very high percentage. And it wasn't just the military that did that. It was their upbringing and their beliefs and where they're at in their life. Now, the cool thing is, because a lot of people think like, oh, this is being sensitive. Like, what's that? Like, I don't want to be that sensitive. But if you are, it's a gift. It's not, a lot of
Yeah.
people say it's
Yeah.
a weakness or whatever, but it's a strength. And there's all this intuitiveness that comes with it, this deep sense of empathy, deep processing that we can do, taking complex ideas and putting them into one easily understandable thing that you could present to somebody else, that a lot of people just can't do.
It's huge. And I had a client I worked with a few months ago that she was in sales for the first time, and highly sensitive in the sense she can feel people's emotions, right? Like, so if she's selling, she's like instantly talking herself out of the sale because she can feel their emotions, right? And she's like, oh, they don't want it. And, already in her head, the little voices and stuff like that. And when we only had to sit down for a couple sessions to help her shift that framework to understand this is a gift and not a curse. Because that's the thing. I think a lot of people, you look at it like, oh, why this? Why, why do I got to be this way? And then I've had clients that like hide it from people, or they want to seem normal. There's so many different things, right? There's so much that goes into this, addictions to mask and like, take some of this stuff away, all this kind of stuff. But helping her just see that instead of using those emotions in that negative light, to be able to shift it and be able to use that intuition to understand, one, be yourself and don't go through the salesy process. And then, be yourself and be that natural curiosity. And then use your emotions to understand how this conversation is going, and like helping her see that. And she was like, she just shifted it. It was so awesome to watch her take and run with that.
Yeah, that's cool. When we can tap into that intuition that's naturally ours, and everyone is intuitive, though the people who are highly sensitive have probably been using their intuition since they were very young. And now they like either they've shut it off because they're like, well, that's too much information, or I don't want to do that. But it's like it can be such a useful tool. It really is useful, and not that you're being a voyeur in someone's mind or their life. You're tuning into what's going on in the universe and around in your environment, having a conversation like this, and tuning into like what's there, and getting more curious about it, like instead of judging it, which I think is easy to do.
It's so easy to do. It's so easy to do. And I don't know if we probably talked about this in the first episode, but the client I had a long time ago that just, she had hired me to help her sell health insurance. And it was the most frustrating client I'd ever had. Like I told my wife, like, I'm going to fire her. Like it was one of my first clients. I had very few money, not very much money coming in. It was like, I'm going to fire her. My wife's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, we're not getting anywhere. We'll make a little bit of progress. And then we'll come back next week and it'll be like so far backwards. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing with her, And then one day I got to see some of her gifts that like she let her mask down because there was this kind of, and we built some trust, and and then this thing happened that was just like the way she was feeling in this mood. And then she got a phone call, and the phone call was a person on the other line that had the same mood that she was having. And she was like, and then everything changed. It was like, it was released. Right. And so she starts now telling and sharing stories with me in how like when she was a little kid, because she could always, sense things were about to happen. When she was a little kid, she was like 3 or 4, and she was outside, and these neighbor boys came over and were like, hey, do you want to play? And she was like, oh, you can't, your mom's mad at you. And they're like, what are you talking about? And then like 15 seconds later, the mom came yelling out. They're yelling at them, yelling their names to get in the house. And they looked at her like you're a witch, right? Like you're like just shocked and scared. They're little kids. And she's had that in her head. She had that in her head her whole entire life. And so she masked who she was and never let anybody know who she was. And it was like, once we started diving into that, and she started becoming who she was supposed to be, her life changed.
Yeah. It's amazing.
She wasn't meant to be a life insurance salesperson.
Yeah, that's awesome. So should she
or
shift?
Health insurance. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing when we can realize the gifts that we have and how we can serve the world. If that's your thing, not everybody wants to serve the world. They might want to serve a few people or help a few people. Or no matter what it is, helping just one person makes a huge difference in the circle of life. I think, your one person is connected to so many other people.
I was going to say, when you think about that, you think about only one person and how many people they impact.
Right. Yeah, the impact is huge. So I encourage anyone who's listening and they're thinking that, well, yeah, I've always wanted to do something else instead of this thing that I'm doing that I'm getting paid for. Check it out. Like maybe even do it on the side. I mean, I know like when I started coaching, I was doing it on the side. I was doing nursing during the day, and then I would take a couple of clients, and that's how it started. I wasn't necessarily, you don't just jump into coaching like you would a new job and be like, all right, here's my sign, putting up my shingle, and hey, I'm a coach, come see me. It doesn't quite work that way for coaches anyway. I know like a therapist, it might, because they're a little more widely accepted and, insurance coverage and all of that. But, and not to compare coaching to therapists, but there is a lot of work that we do is very
absolutely.
therapeutic.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Very, very thin line there. Absolutely. How did you get your first clients?
How did I get
Random questions way out here. Yeah.
Gosh. Well, they were probably like my family.
Yeah.
Right. I'm sure I worked with some, friends and family, but then I also, I remember way back when I first moved here, which was in 2005. I remember putting flyers up at my chiropractor's office, like, hey, doing this and that and trying to get some clients. And then I think, I'm trying to think of what did I do in between. Oh, I know what it was. I started doing workshops. So I Louise Hay, you know who she is?
No.
Oh, well, she's like the mother of affirmation. So back in the 80s, she wrote this book, You Can Heal Your Life, and the mind-body connection, super powerful. She passed away a few years ago. I took one of her training courses, and it's like a week-long course to become a certified teacher in her program. Anyway, long story short, I did that because, here's what happened. I was working at U of M, and I got a grant to, I applied for a grant, and I ended up getting the largest grant that they had ever given for a program to help liver transplant patients have a reduced length of stay in the hospital by presenting them with some of the concepts of Louise Hay. That's not how I presented it exactly, but it won. And then I went through this training and was going to bring it to fruition, but it was one of those things, kind of like my situation now. It was like I was doing all of this heavy lifting and it just wasn't going anywhere, and I didn't get a chance to finish it. But the idea was cool, and I wanted to help people in that way. So then I got clients out of just sharing that with my nurse friends in the community at the hospital,
So awesome.
and then it just kind of went from there.
I love how this, it was a random question. and I love this as a podcast host, how then it can tie back. You ever see The Simpsons, how it starts off with this random thing and then it comes out and ties back. It shifts the subject and then it ties back home. Literally, we've been talking about when something's not for you. And I think a lot of times too, we look at things in a constructive way of in that box, I had to be on a board to make a difference.
Yeah.
You looked at, I had to have this nonprofit to make this difference, right? Or you looked at it like I need to have this grant and work for this job in order to make a difference.
Yes.
But then you're able to take what you were doing with this grant over here and actually create your business.
Yes, exactly. Yep. That's what happened. Really. And it was really the launching pad. I really truly feel it was the universe saying, this is the door, Jill, go, even though it may not look like you think as you go forward. And it surely didn't. I mean, I remember one of my surgeons who was supporting the program in the hospital. I remember he was asking me, how's it going with the program? Because he was keeping it all upbeat and he was always super positive. And then I had another guy on the team and he was just like, whatever you want, Jill, I'm supporting you all the way. And this guy wasn't even in the program. He was just knew about it. And he just saw me one day walking down the hall. How are you doing? And I just kind of had a face. He's like, are you okay? So we chatted and I'm like, I just feel like there's a lot. And I've been doing this for so long and I just can't seem to get ahead. I forget what I shared. And he says, Jill, don't do it. And he just, it was like the voices of angels coming out of his mouth. And he was just so matter of fact about it. He's just like, don't do it. It's so what? And I'm like, but then I have to do this and it means that. And I gave all this money and all this training. And he's like, who cares? I was just like, wow, okay. So I kind of took that ball and ran with it. And the interesting thing is, it was shortly after that, I had a back injury at the hospital. So I was doing practice management, discharge planning. I was not doing the heavy lifting of patients or anything. In fact, there is a lift team at the hospital to do that. But I remember we played softball or something and I ran on a base and I remember feeling something funky, went to work the next week, sitting there feeling something in my back. I was like, oh no. And then I ended up going on disability for 3 months. And then they're like, well, you're starting to look better. You're going to come back. So I had to make the decision. Do I come back or do I make a go of my business? And that was 2012.
Yeah.
Guess what I did?
Yes.
Yeah. So interesting how it took all of that doctor saying to me, let it go. And then this back injury, make a decision, Jill. Like really, it was kind of like, you are struggling, you are waffling. And at the time I had also had a program for teens that I had co-created with somebody. So this was kind of all born out of the foster child that we had, and all of the need I could see in like the community mental health in here. And so we had a group. I had a group of 10 kids from community mental health, like 5 girls, 5 boys, around the ages of 11 to 14. And I was doing this 6-week or 8-week program with them that I created. And it was after I was supposed to be on disability. I had like super high blood pressure issue going on. I had a concussion. I mean, there was all kinds of crazy stuff that happened. Like, I'm not even going to get into all that, but I was doing this program anyway. And that's where I was feeling like I just was making a difference. Even though I had mega high blood pressure, probably shouldn't have been there. There wasn't anyone else that was going to come teach it. And these kids were, counting on me. And it wasn't like I did it for a bunch of money.
Yeah.
It was a very small, payout cash wise, but the reward and the payment for me was huge. That was like, this is how I want to help people. Maybe not this age group or whatever, but I still do. So actually what we do now is Sandra and I, who co-created this program together, we teach teachers around the world who are certified in Louise Hay's work, this program that we created to teach teens.
Amazing.
So yeah, interesting.
That's amazing. That's amazing how that just all shaped in. You had to it's like you're getting thrown these disasters
exactly.
in order to
it was crazy. I mean, there probably could be a whole nother podcast on just the way life shows up for us.
Absolutely.
And how you can take the gift out of it. And at the time I was feeling pretty miserable because I wanted to go back to work, and my team was like, and it was a great team. I loved that work. And I was just thinking the other day, like how I really enjoyed showing up to that job and making a difference in people's lives. And the patients who I didn't even know, I just meet them that morning and like, hey, here's some thoughts, or here's like a little coaching question or whatever to get their mind perked up and get them going for the day. And I'm like, yeah, I just want more of that. I want to be able to do more of that for more people without having to worry about, what your discharge plan is,
Yeah.
So then I wanted that so bad that I made it happen, but not exactly in the way that I would have planned,
So tell me more about that.
Well, like the whole getting out of the hospital, like I kept thinking like, this isn't the way. So actually when I was in nursing school, I always would say, this was one of those self-fulfilling prophecies, I'm never going to work in the hospital. I'm never going to work. I'm not going to do that. I didn't even want to work in an office. Like I didn't know what I was going to do. Like when I got out of the hospital, because, we did all these clinical rotations and none of them enthralled me. I wasn't like drawn, like some people just know right away, like, well, I'm going to be a nurse practitioner. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Well, I considered nurse practitioner. I considered getting into a master grad course. I almost did that. That probably would have been, I was that close to that disaster because that probably would have ended badly too. Just saying, not because I'm not a good student, but because I was just doing too damn much to prove myself.
Yep.
And actually my friend Sandra, my co-creator in this program, I remember one email, and I tell her this every once in a while. And I'm like, there's this one time when I had a alphabet soup after my name because I was just trying to like feel like I was something, like I was enough. And she wrote she goes, what's all this stuff behind your name? And then she goes, I hope you know that you're enough. And I remember that smacked me one day. I was like, holy crap. True. Like, I don't think I'm enough. And that's been a thing I've been carrying for a long time to try to help other people. You don't want to feel like this. So anyway, back to the little disasters happening. It was just all of this stuff. I had such a strong desire to do something different than what I was doing, than being in the hospital. And even though I loved the teamwork and that feel of the excitement in the hospital and the things that we did there, and I did my job so well, I mean, I was really good at it, and I kind of missed that part,
Yeah.
But it was a whole lot of stress that I just don't miss. That part I don't miss. And just all of the things that happened in a contagion. And I wouldn't have planned having to go to the ER with a concussion and then having a week later blood pressure of 220 over 110, or whatever it was. It was crazy.
Yeah.
Even I know. And being a nurse, I was just like, oh my God, waking my husband up at 2 a.m. We got to go to the ER. I might have a stroke going on. Like, I don't want to have a stroke. I'm having so much stress. And it was because I was off work and I'd never done that before. And I was making it mean so many things about me. Plus there was some other health things going on, but I had a concussion too, and I had passed out. That's what the concussion happened. I passed out in my kitchen. I stood up. I was on a bunch of different meds for pain control because the back pain was out of control. It was out of sight. I could barely do anything. And I remember standing up. I somehow turned, lost my I just felt like I went out of my body completely. And somehow I bent forward and it was like something just catapulted me forward in a hinge position, just whack. And I smacked into the cabinet and I gave myself this huge concussion with a big goose egg on my head. My husband thought I was messing around on the floor with the dogs. He comes in the kitchen and he's like, what are you doing on the floor? He's kind of laughing. And I'm just like and I'm just kind of like coming to him, like, what's going on? And he's like, oh my God. He saw this thing on my head. And yeah. And then when I got to the ER, they're like, well, I think I know what you're here for. So anyway, so when I say I wouldn't have planned it, I wouldn't have planned having all these visits to the hospital and MRIs and whatever else happened after that. But at the same time, it's like, now I kind of get it, when I look at other people with health issues, and it's a lot of what we're doing inside ourselves, and it doesn't have to be that hard, people. I wish someone would have told me that back then. It doesn't have to be that damn hard.
I love that. Like, that's like, it doesn't have to be that hard.
It's true, right? I mean, God, I swear, like, some of my life has just been, I was just telling a friend about this the other day, that life can feel, because it doesn't mean it is a struggle, but it can sure feel like a struggle. And we can buy into that struggle and make it our day, our life. We can make it our mantra. We can bring other people on our mission. Come on board. I'm on the struggle bus. Join me. This is fun in here. Oh, you're struggling too. Awesome. Let's struggle together. But it doesn't have to be a struggle.
It doesn't have to be. And that is just a coping mechanism to make us feel good about ourselves. If you see that misery loves company, it's because you're justifying and you're like, well, okay. You're like, look, they're miserable too. Everybody's miserable.
Right.
Everybody's miserable. What the coolest thing for me, for the last 6.5, almost 7 years of having my business is the people that have been drawn them into my life, you and all the guests that I've had, and like all these amazing people. And it's like, it's not the misery loves company crowd. It's the opposite.
Yeah.
And you find that there's so many, and I talk about it all the time, difference makers out there. There's so many people out there helping and creating the great things in the world.
Yes.
And I get to go around and surround myself around those people. And then life just changes.
Mm-hmm. Being of service. That's like, get out of struggle. If you want to get out, here's the little insight. If you want to get out of struggle, get into service. Like, even if it's just doing something simple, right?
Absolutely.
And sometimes I have to remind myself of that when I'm feeling that, not woe is me, but kind of like, okay, it's one of those days, emotions are flying high. I mean, I got triggered by my horse yesterday. I was like, oh geez, I'm a terrible horse person. I'm a terrible horse mom. It's just amazing what anything can trigger us, right? Yeah, I'm sure parents. I don't have kids, but kids can trigger parents.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? We can just have the worst day because of what our son or daughter said or whatever. But we don't have to go there. We can choose to, and I know some people will say, well, it isn't a choice. It just happens. Well, it's because it's a habit, right?
It's a habit. And it's the things that you pay attention to and add like points to. And so we talked a little bit about the objection handling boot camp that we've been doing, and like kind of that little voice mastery. And one of the things that we do every time, or this framework that we've taught, is how to celebrate the wins and how to acknowledge and let go of the losses, right?
Yes.
And what did you learn out of that?
Mm-hmm.
The losses or the failures or however you look at them. And we add so many points in our life to the bad things. We spend so much time in our heads about what other people are going to think, or we assume what they think. That's the worst part, is when we have the full out dialogue. We know what they think. And then when we talk to them, that's not the thought they had at all. Isn't that crazy? Have you had those dialogues where it's like,
oh my gosh. Yes, absolutely. It's kind of like that thing I like to say, there's unspoken conversations, and we have them in our head, but they're unspoken and they're not true.
Yeah.
A lot of times they're just not true.
They're just not true.
And what you said about the celebrating the wins is so important. Because even the smallest ones, we need to celebrate and acknowledge ourselves for. And that's what gets us going forward, not for like when we get the big win and all the little wins up to the big one they don't mean anything. They mean everything.
So every week we have the boot campers that come. They start off the meeting with they have a commitment that they committed to, and so they talk about that commitment and what was the wins. What did you learn in that kind of thing? And people are so like, it's taking quite a few weeks to kind of switch that habit of like, yeah, I did complete what I said I was going to do, but I didn't close anyone. I didn't, but there's always that but behind it. Oh yeah, I did. I checked off all those things. I got it done, but
yeah,
like, whoa.
Right.
Wow. You did what you said you were going to do. You got these things done. You had 5 conversations. Like, what'd you learn? And now it's a deeper process of like, what did you actually learn? It's not that they even said no. Right.
Right.
So it's just funny because it's like, we want to beat ourselves up even for the wins, and we got to stop and acknowledge and be like, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's how we break the habit.
Absolutely.
So get into the habit of celebrating and, I'm awesome. Like, the one-handed high five slap, right? I mean, but regardless of how we do it, I remember I had a client once where I was saying, she had some tasks to do, and one of the tasks was just like her kitchen was a mess and she just needed to like get going. And I was saying to her, she's like, well, what's your wins today? Well, all I can say is I unloaded and loaded the dishwasher or whatever. And I was like, well, good for you. That's awesome. That's, it sounds little. And then the comeback was, well, I'm not going to celebrate myself for doing something I should be doing anyway. I'm like, oh, okay, let's talk about this because that's a should. Like,
who says you should do that?
Right, exactly. Whose voice is that? Because I'm betting that's not yours. So we do these things like thinking that we have to be this adult and do all these adulting things, and any of those adulting things don't get credit for anything. Like, that's not true. I mean, you got out of bed today, you're breathing, you're doing something, you're walking around, you showed up at your job, which is impacting lives or whatever that you're doing. I mean, if you have a cat, you fed your cat, great. I mean, I might be talking a little bit lower level here for some people who are on the struggle bus and they feel like they can't get out. But the truth is, even if you aren't on the struggle bus, celebrate the little things. Just recognize. And then the gratitude thing. I think that's just another one. It's really big.
We get what we focus on.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we take that time to be grateful for the things that we have, we find more of those things versus when we, that misery loves company, when we're like, oh, life sucks. People are going to think about, you start to find that.
Yes. So there's something called, and you may know this term, the reticular activating system.
It gets me excited when anybody says that phrase. Yeah.
So we have that reticular activating system, or the RAS, which will show us all of the things we are focusing on. So if it is the negative Nelly voice, or the bad thing that happened yesterday, or the thing that irritates us about somebody, we're going to keep finding that thing out in the world. But if we're focusing on the good stuff, your subconscious is like, okay, I'm going to find more of that. That's where these synchronicities come when we're working on manifesting something in our lives, and we get those little hints and glimmers of, oh, I'm on the right track. Awesome.
Yep.
Yay. That's something to celebrate. And that's more like priming that RAS to help you see more of what you want to see instead of the stuff that you don't.
This happened. So this is like just a little story that on Saturday we were going to my nephew turned 1, and so we were going to his birthday party. And but earlier in the day, me and my wife were stopped by a train over here down around the corner, and we were stopped by the train. It was a really long train, and my wife Gracie started talking about like, can you imagine being responsible for all these carts? And so, the long story short of this conversation, we both agreed that we had never met a train conductor. We'd never met anybody that worked on a train, right? And so like, I'd love to pick their brain, like ask these questions, right? I'd love to know about what their day looks like and stuff like that. So we go to this birthday party, and we had never met the father of our nephew. And so he was there at the party. He lives in a different state. And so he was there at the party, and he walked by, and somebody goes, oh yeah, he's a train conductor. I was like, shut the front door. I'm like, what'd you say? He's a train conductor? She was like, yeah. She was like, what's going on? I'm like, we were just talking about we'd never met a train conductor. It's probably not that I've never met a train conductor, but it never had any kind of important significance in my life. There are probably people that have said they were train conductors, or whatever, but I never noted it. We never had a deep conversation about it. And so when somebody said, oh, he's a conductor, my mind was looking for that. If we wouldn't have had that conversation earlier in the day, those words would have meant nothing to me. Yeah,
it would have just been, you might not have even really consciously heard them, but that day you heard it. And did you get your questions answered, Jason? That's what I want to know.
We did. We did. He walked by, and I'm just a natural curious person and everything. So I jumped out. We had a conversation, and he had a lot of a lot of feedback for it. He's been doing it for a year, and he was like, he wouldn't recommend other people to do it. It's a severe, like it's a mind game. Like you have to have a lot of patience and be ready to do just long, boring, tedious things.
Interesting.
So if you can make that, he was like, if you can make it for 5 years, you get paid really well.
Note to self.
I'm like, he's like basically, if you he's like, who would be good at it is somebody that can take a severe amount of like mental pain and be fine. And I'm like,
wow.
Good.
They must do some heavy personality testing prior to the gig. I mean, wow. I had no idea. I would not have guessed that.
He's like, they're on call 24/7.
Wow.
They work long days, and mostly what they do is paperwork and keeping the engineer open or awake so that you know that no one comes off the track. And he's like, it's a lot of responsibility because a guy that has his job is one of the ones that was responsible for one of the big crashes recently or the big derailments.
Wow.
And so he's like, there's a lot of responsibility. Super nice guy, gave us a lot of detail about it. But yeah, I found him.
Interesting. Yeah, good.
But again, that would have meant nothing to me if we would have not had that conversation. The reticular activation system made that important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And we can make other things important.
Exactly. We have control over it.
Right. Just got to choose to focus on the good stuff.
Yes. Yeah. The gratitude, and you have things, no matter how bad things are, you have things to be grateful for, whether it's the small things.
That's right.
I empty the dishwasher today.
Mm-hmm.
I woke up.
Mm-hmm.
I've told this story a few times on the show, but I had this sales team that I was working with last year, and their salespeople we do positive focus at the beginning of our meetings, and they had nothing positive to say about their lives, period. Not just this job, about their lives. And it's like, no, because they do a positive for personal life and a positive for focus and they'd have more positive things for work than they had on their personal life. And I'm like,
interesting.
you woke up today, like you're breathing, you got in your car, you're able to drive. Like, think about the little things because not everybody has that. Interesting.
So then when you say that, I'm thinking a couple of things. Like, what do you think is in your experience, what do you think is behind all of that for us? But then you're saying this was like a company, right?
Yeah.
So then I go to like the culture of the company, right? So just though there's kind of twofold there, but you don't have to divulge anything identifying, but I'm just curious, like what was behind all of that? Because that just
culture of the company was bad, and I felt like misery loves company. And I think maybe whenever I'm hiring for people, or whenever I've hired for jobs in the past, I it's kind of an intuitive thing, and it's really hard to coach because it's kind of how I feel people out.
Right.
But are they happy?
Yeah.
And honestly, I hired one of these people, and I was looking more at traits of sales and just different things, and I wasn't asking the right questions. And I think if I would ask the right questions in the first place of understanding who that person was as a person, I would have shaken this out much quicker. If you're not happy, if you have no happiness in your life, you're not going to do well with very many things, especially sales. You're going to get beaten down pretty quickly because it is a mental game. Mm-hmm. And if you're already beaten down before you get there, good luck.
That is such a good point. The happiness factor is a key one. And I was just hearing that the other day. I was listening to something where, like, when people have conversations, often they're just like, how's the kids? How's the job? But they're not really asking each other, are you happy?
Yeah.
Because that's really more important than all that other stuff. I mean, not that your kids aren't important or your pets aren't important, but we've got to have that happiness first.
5,000%. And you can find happiness in the small things, but what do you want?
Right.
What does happiness look like to you? And we talked about knowing thyself earlier, is like, what does happiness look like to you? Because a lot of times we live other people's life. We get these expectations of, you got to go and get the job and go to college, get the job, get married, have kids. Mm-hmm. And if you don't do those things, why didn't you have kids? I'm sure you've got this question a lot, right?
Yes, exactly.
It's not your expectations or your want or your life. It's other people's expectations of the perfect script life.
Yes. Yes. In fact, with that said, when my husband and I decided we were going to be done not trying, when his mother found out, boy, was she upset about that. Like, wow. And people still get that way, and it's whatever we are making it mean and how much attachment we have to whatever it is. And it's like, well, and then And then what do we do? Like you just said, we're going with someone else's goals. If I were to say, oh, well, I better just do this to make her happy or to be part of the family or belong, and then I'm kind of denying myself and my husband's
5,000%.
desires, right?
Yep.
So we've got to really be careful about it because that's a big decision that you're stuck with. But I mean, that is a big commitment, you know?
In this book, Shine, that I was talking about, there's 3 discoveries for the driven person. The first one is that the discovery that welcome, you're driven. The number one thing is the understanding that you're not enough. It's intense in us, and there's an actual genetic. There's a D2, D4 gene that in driven people is what's the word I'm looking for? Not destroyed, damaged, or
mutated.
Mutated.
Yeah,
it's mutated, and so we have this constant feeling that we're never enough. We're not doing enough. We're not, So it's that constant fire that drives us, that creates the good and the bad that goes into that. The second thing is that you make decisions based out of one or two things: either fear, which is your ego, or out of love, which is, which is your heart, your soul, and so when it comes down to that decision of like having kids, is it fear of what other people are going to think, or your mother-in-law being mad at you for the rest of your life, or is it like the love of actually wanting to do it?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Because you can look at it both ways.
Yeah.
There's like different sides to it. And so
and
that's
if
a really
you're
good
at
distinction.
Peace in your life, it doesn't matter what other people.
Exactly. Yeah. And that goes with anything.
Anything.
Because people just don't know what's going on. Unless you have them as a guest on your podcast, then they can tell everything about themselves.
And you ever notice, I said this in the last episode too, is like, it's kind of like when you go to the concert, if you went to a concert and there's like a band that either you don't like or you've never heard, it is the opening band, and then you end up liking them and you end up buying their album and like, following them and stuff. There's been so many concerts that I've been to like that, either I didn't like the person or I didn't know who they were or the band, and then I ended up liking them. And it's kind of the same thing when you hear people's stories, like you can make all these judgments, people can talk about you, all those kind of things. Like you think about prejudice and racism and stuff like that. You see people like racist on both ends, that then they get in a room and hang out and spend time together and they get to know each other and they get to hear people's stories, and all of a sudden now it's a person. Right.
Exactly.
And so that's my whole entire concept on content. Boom. Here you go. That's it. Because when I started my business, it was like, how do I become a person? Right. Because there's in sales, when you're selling, and when you start a brand new business, you are out there selling because you're like, how am I going to eat? Right. And so when you're out there and you're selling, it's hard to become a person because people see you like, oh God, here comes Jason. He's going to try to sell us on coaching. Right. And I've never been like that, but that's what people kind of think. They even don't want to ask you about your business. I talked about the coffee thing. People wouldn't ask me about coaching or consulting because they'd have like an internal fear maybe that I would ask them like about
or
them.
that you're analyzing
that
them.
I'm analyzing them or whatever the case may be. So I had a point to that. I don't know why I'm rambling. I don't know.
That's right. It's interesting that we have these different perspectives on, you said the third concept of that book was doing things out of love or fear.
Yeah.
And the more we can focus on love, which actually right now I'm re-listening to The Power by Rhonda Byrne. And that's all. The power is love and loving all things. And it's a whole book just on that. And if she's the one that wrote The Secret. So So The Power, I highly recommend anybody listening to that book or reading it, whatever. I love listening to it.
It's a really big book, right?
I don't know how big it is.
Okay.
It might be.
Okay.
I mean, it's an audiobook, so I can't tell you how big it is.
Yeah.
But I think there's, maybe 12, 13 chapters in it. But really, really good, and really good reminders, like things that I know that I was practicing years ago, and then I just kind of fell away or slipped out of because I was going for the wrong goal, or I was trying to keep other people happy, or I was trying to stay in the good graces of the community or whatever I thought the community wanted me to be.
Yep.
And so I'm making this, I'm going to make a declaration, Jason, right now, that I declare to be myself. No matter what that means to others, that I'm just going to be myself. And I'm going to invite other people to make that declaration with me, because safety in numbers, right? But the truth is, the more we are ourselves, the more we can show up that way, the better the world is, instead of putting on the mask and being a fake person. And not that I would say I was fake. I didn't know I was doing what I was doing sometimes. Yep. And that's kind of the facade. We're all, not facade, but little trap that we fall into. And we don't know because it's kind of like our subconscious keeps it from us until we have the awareness like, oh. So I'm having this whole like, oh moment the last few months, like, oh boy, is anybody going to like me anymore after I reveal like this part of me or, I show up as me. But the truth is I have to love me and be me regardless of what anybody thinks. And if somebody's going to have a problem with what I've done or the choices I've made, thank God I'm not a politician, but
yeah.
The truth is I've got to not care. I've got to love me first and then be okay with, whatever happens from there.
Right. Because who wants to be around people that are only going to love them if they do what they want them to do or be who they want them to be?
Yeah. That's not really a relationship anyway. It's a fake dynamic of something like there's some kind of give and take there or...
and we only get so much time on this earth. We never know when it's going to end. And why spend that time and that energy on someone like that? Exactly. And I'm not saying they're bad people.
Right.
Not
aligned.
But it's just we get to choose who we get to spend our time and energy with, and why not spend it with people that like us for us.
Exactly.
For who we are.
Yeah.
Because that's a whole lot less energy for us to spend. In fact, it fills our energy.
For sure. Yeah. And the more we're around people that lift us up, we're lifting them up. It's like a mutual thing and we're all feeling good together. And then we attract more people like that. And then more people who aren't maybe like that are like, I wonder what they're doing. I want to be more like that, or that's inspiring.
Yeah.
Right.
I was talking to a young man the other day that I actually worked with on this client. This guy was phenomenal guy. So catching up with him, he just started actually there's a company called First Form. It's like a nutritional company. And he just became a influencer for them. Nice. And so he's something out of his comfort zone. He's like, I don't even have a social media built up. I've never really posted on social media outside of some family stuff. And he was like, talking kind of like, what do I do here? And what happens when nobody responds? Like, what happens when nobody reacts? And I'm like, I've been through that experience of creating the content and putting it out there and then nobody responds to it. And what I can tell you is keep doing it. Because you never know who's actually watching it and enjoying it. What happened to me is I was putting it out there and I was like in my head of like, I must suck. Nobody's listening, all this kind of stuff. And then I'd go out in public and somebody would pull me to the side and be like, thank you for posting that video the other day. I really needed that. I was really down in my head and I wasn't doing that thing. And I listened to your video and it really motivated me. And like, oh, awesome. And I got as I kept doing it and I'd get a few more likes and but more, it was the conversations that people would have as I'd go out in public. It's like, okay, this stuff is actually working. And then like we talked about the voices in our head and the worrying about people who are going to think. Like I started creating content and putting it out there and it's like, oh my God, am I going to overflood people with content? The only content I post is really on this podcast clips, like podcast clips all over the place. But I get more people coming up to me and saying, thank you for putting up that video, or comments or messages, or I go out in public and people I've never met before that know me, which is really awesome. Like they know me kind of deep because they've listened to all this stuff. Yeah,
that's right.
That's so cool. And it's worth far more than that fear that I had for that time.
And it's so much fun when you're out there in the wild and just being you.
Yeah.
And, something I'll share with you that just for anybody else who's doing, putting themselves out there, being visible, as my coach had said, you have lurkers. They're not necessarily, you may not think they're watching you, but they're watching you and they're not saying anything. So you get that validation when you're out in the wild and they get to pull you aside and validate you, which is really awesome. But even those people who might be doing online businesses and whatever, there are a lot of lurkers. We just have no idea who's really... Because people are curious. People are naturally, humanly curious. Like, what are they doing? And if they're drawn to you in some way, doesn't mean they have to engage with you or say anything. They're engaging in their mind. Just like you had this, someone knows you really well because they've watched, your last 30 podcasts. And now they're like, cool. And they feel like maybe they're so close to you and connected, even though you're like, hey, just met you. But, it's awesome.
It's really awesome because I don't have to tell stories. I can get to know them. And that's what's really flushed out of creating the content is this happened even probably before the last time we had the podcast, or last time our last episode was like people were inviting me to conversations, or I was inviting them to conversations, and then they would tell me a story about something that reminded me of one of my stories that I had shared. And so I started telling them and they'd be like, oh yeah, I know. That's why I called you. That's why I scheduled a meeting. I heard it in this content.
Oh,
or
nice.
there was this is like the most mind blowing time is this is the first time this happened, is like I got on a Zoom meeting with somebody that she was liking and commenting on my videos on LinkedIn. And so we get on this Zoom because I invited her. I was like, hey, thank you. I appreciate you. I always see you this. I'd love to get to know you. So I invited her for a short connection meeting. We get on and she was like, oh my God, you're real. And I was like, what do you mean? What do you mean by that? But she was like, you have to understand, I've been watching your videos. Like a lot of people watch their favorite actor on Netflix. And so now we're talking and you're real. And that's what the content really does. It puts you out there and then you tell your stories and people feel like they know you. And so you build that know, like, trust without having to do the work. And so I'm saying this for your benefit.
Thanks, Jason. Not just mine, but
no. But and then what's awesome is like coming out of this, I love when you start saying like you're kind of trapped in this hole of like, oh, do I put content out there and stuck because I'm like, what timing to be on this podcast and to have this conversation because there's so much content in this conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's huge. And I haven't really educated my audience on what I do and who I am really. Why? I don't know. I mean, I could take some guesses. Like I don't want to reveal. And funny thing is I've always been really vulnerable, always willing to share the story or whatever, but usually it's in a smaller group, right? So when you're talking about growing your audience and having, I have a much bigger list now due to the summit. I have a much bigger Facebook group now due to the summit. Now it's like, wow, now there's that many eyeballs that could possibly see my stuff and learn about me. And the other people were more like, I kind of knew you and I could shake your hand if I wanted to. And now I'm like, I don't even know who you are in the Netherlands, or I don't even know who you are over there in Italy and wherever else, cool. I just like, wow. So I think that I just was holding myself back from, because what if they don't? And so I was telling that to my coach probably like just 2 weeks or so ago. So I'm like, yeah, I think I'm having this trouble of like, they're going to reject me. She goes, yeah, so just like that doctor. So I have it too. So what are you going to do? Well, I guess I'm going to do it anyway.
And if they reject you, what's the worst that's going to happen?
That's right. I know. Just like, I'll lose a follower or two, which, that's fine.
Yeah.
You can't be attached to the numbers and, cause it's not about that for me. And I think before I thought it was, because that's what a lot of these marketers I'd follow would be like, you want to build your numbers, you want to have all this stuff. And then you'd be like, oh, okay, I got to get all these, collect followers or whatever. But it's not about that. Like, I just want my message out to the right people.
Yeah.
The right people, not just like, the masses and they're going to just, whatever, who's Jill, who cares? I want the people who want to know what I have to share and they're going to take it to heart and they're going to help themselves or whatever, the highly sensitive people that I can align with and I get them, they get me.
Yep. Because let's say only one person listens to this podcast, but it's the right person.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Right. And we talked about this earlier. How much impact does one person make?
It's huge.
If one person can become happier, unblock their energy, be their true self and deliver their impact and make their difference in the world, they're impacting their family, their friends, their immediate environment, like thinking about, everyone they touch.
Exactly. I was thinking about like LinkedIn or just anywhere we are connected and we can see the number of followers we have. And even there's one person in there even, and just thinking about the connection we have when we are so connected in social media. Yeah. Again, the lurkers, we don't know who's watching, who isn't, but yeah, we've got our regular family, our friends, the circle goes out. We've got our inner circle and our outer circle, and it's a lot of impact.
Have you ever had anybody that you didn't even know that you impacted that then told you or reached out to you? And
yeah,
what was that like?
I had a thank you note actually come through the Warrior Path Home website that was like, thank you for everything. I can't remember what, it was a very short note and they sent a donation. So I was like, wow, that's pretty amazing. And then I realized this person was connected with another, like a client I had worked with. And so that would be like the impact of, it wasn't the direct client. It was, I don't even remember the relationship, but like girlfriend maybe. Okay. And so I've had other like moms of clients message me or send me an email. Yeah, it's powerful because then you're like, because, oftentimes we're just in our work and we're just doing our thing. And, I'm not thinking about all the lives I'm impacting until someone says it. Yep. And then I'm like, oh, and then when someone messages me or I get an email or whatever, or I remember during the, this was a big one for me, was the family of a veteran sent a huge donation to Warrior Path Home. And it was just this lovely thank you note of thank you for everything you've done for our son. And it was just like, wow, that's awesome, and it's like, it's just all I can say is just like, thank you. And you want to just like go gushing over them. Like, wow, that's so like, I feel so seen, so touched, so heard,
Yeah.
and I'm so glad that you see the difference. And it's so much so that, he's a grown man and you're recognizing all this and willing to like give because of that. I mean, it's just powerful stuff. And that just makes me remember how we are rippling everything we do out into the world.
So a lot of times we don't even get to know.
Yeah.
Which is, I'm really passionate about letting people know that impacted my life, like letting them know, because oftentimes we don't tell people or we don't say it until we're at their funeral, and this is how this person changed my life. And you never know what people are going through.
That's right.
Because again, we see something different in people than what they see in themselves. We look up to somebody and then they're in their head worrying about what people are going to think.
Yeah, I know. Right? You see your clients and you can see how awesome they are. You see the potential in them. And I think that's a really great reminder, even to me, like right now. And as much as I think I do edify people or acknowledge, and it's just it's a good reminder, because I think I've been a little self-absorbed, and I don't mean in an egocentric way, but because of all the stuff I've been going through this summer, and I don't want to, I'm not looking for a pity party or anything like that. I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm just recognizing like, wow, I just been down in a hole, and even my coach was just like, it sounds like you're doing a lot of self stuff. What's the best way to jump out of being the coach needs a coach, right? And I'm like, all the things she's saying, I'm like, Jesus is everything. Like I would tell somebody else, and like, I'm just like, I've got my own blind spots. I've got my own, things I need help with. And she's like, what's the best way to get out of, what was the word I was saying? She said, what's the greatest way to build self-worth? Because I was like, I feel like just like, I don't have any self-worth right now. I'm just not doing what I should be doing. All the judgments, all the voices. And she's like, well, what's the quickest way to do that? And I was like, well, and I started to think about it. I'm like, I don't know, get clients or something. She goes, sort of. And I was like, then she said something else. And I was like, oh, wait, I think I know where you're going with this. I'm like, to be of service. She's like, yes. Like, that's it. Be of service, and then be out there and acknowledging people, and just giving and acknowledging. I think those are just my biggest takeaways from today.
That's awesome. This has been so awesome. I feel like we've went deep through here, and this is an amazing conversation for somebody to listen to.
Yeah, super fun.
And you had mentioned briefly earlier about, people starting a business, or I forgot how you phrased it, but something of the nature of like being able to go and pursue their passions and create their business. And that's exactly what this podcast is for. And so I hope as people are listening and kind of see, and man, I love how that circled back. Was that a realization for you as far as like how the grant in the hospital didn't work out, but then I was able to open the business, and how it wasn't?
Yeah, I did. It took a little while though. It wasn't like a moment of instant realization. It was, I had carried actually that for a long time, the guilt of like the money that came in through the grant that put me through training that I didn't take to fruition. And I remember when I gave the money back, because it's not like I had it in my clutches, but I had access to the to the financing. And I remember I was on disability, and I had to call the person that was in charge of it, and it was really hard to do. Like, I don't know what I was expecting her to say when I called, but it was just like, oh God, I have to return this, like, whatever it was, $15,000, or, let it go and not, do the thing, and just basically say, I can't do this anymore. And I remember exactly where I was sitting when I made that call, and all she was like, again, okay. I mean, I have all these stories I build up in my head about what people are thinking, going to say. And I remember carrying that judgment though. She never said anything. She didn't care. She was just in charge of the money, and that's it. She didn't care what I did with it. The surgeons didn't care. My team didn't. Nobody cared but me.
Yep.
I'm the one that made all the stories about it and carried it until I let it go, and then basically freed myself from that burden. And that was probably it probably was only maybe 3 years or so ago that I finally let that crap go. and then I could see what you were saying. Like, I could see there was like a doorway, like, oh, hello.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Because I think the things that we most don't want to go through, we don't want to go through the most, are the things that create the best things. So I'm really excited to see what the next several months for you is going to be.
Thank you. I'm excited too, Jason. And thanks for inviting me and being part of this. And I'd love to check out more of your your program that you have at the chamber. It sounds really awesome.
Oh yeah, the boot camp. Oh. If you're talking about the little voice, I'm like, oh my God, I think you'd love this this course. So what's really cool, we offer a free session. So you can come, it's a 9 to 10:30 on every Monday. We didn't do yesterday because of Labor Day. But we're picking back up next Monday. And so you can come for free for the first time, experience it, and then and we roll out our program from there.
Awesome.
But yeah, it's been cool. It's like I said, we just did 5 weeks, past 5 weeks of doing the program, and we're already in a situation of getting grant funded. And so
that's so fun.
The Howell Hub has a program for small businesses and entrepreneurs to support them. And we had somebody from Ann Arbor Spark come to our boot camp last Monday, and they're just like, this isn't just objections and overcoming sales and building your sales, but it's like real life stuff, because the things that we've talked about is that little voice mastery. It's overcoming that little voice, whether you're selling or you're building personal relationships, so it carries over in sales, leadership, and in life.
Yeah. Sounds great.
So, and now I know you had talked about you had something that you wanted to offer the audience.
Oh yeah. So any of the highly sensitive people out there, I have a download that I created called, it's a wheel of life. Everybody's probably seen a wheel of life before, especially if you worked with a coach. But this is actually for highly sensitive people. So there's different categories. A lot of times the wheel of life has like a relationship, career, family. So this has some of those things on it, but it has more about spirituality. Gosh, I'm blanking. I should have brought a copy of it with me, but it's really cool. I created this just for highly sensitive people, and it's a free download that I'll have a link to share with you guys.
Awesome. We'll put that in the show notes, and I'm excited. I'm going to take that myself.
Awesome. Thank you.
Absolutely. Jill, this has been a phenomenal conversation. Thank you so much for coming down.
It's my pleasure. I love talking with you, Jason. We always seem to open up so many things.
I know. I love it. This has been an awesome one.
Thank you.
My pleasure.